What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Big Dog Brett. Thanks so much for tuning in. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share. Today, we're going over the Georgia versus South Carolina game. And guys, I got to tell you, this was a game that you spent the first half of the game absolutely disgusted with what you were watching. And then it's a game where you saw in the second half, you're like, all right, this is kind of how we should be playing, but why did it take so long to get it figured out? So we're going to get into it a little bit. You know, my personal opinions on the matter are, well, let me back up. There's a lot of people that saying, and they're blaming Mike Bobo. Let me break this down for you. This is not a Mike Bobo problem. And I would be the first person to tell you this is a Mike Bobo problem if I thought it were. So you kind of have to ask yourself, why in the world are we throwing the ball where we're throwing it? Why are we doing what we're doing? Some pretty silly play calls as far as what we saw in the first half. Except that it's not the play call. Every play that's called up there has 3 or 4 different places the ball can go. And it is up to Carson Beck to read the defense and decide on where to throw the ball. And in the first half, he was staring down his receivers. He absolutely went immediately to the check guy almost every time. And because of that, it made it nearly impossible to do anything. South Carolina knew Georgia wasn't going to stretch the field, and they could just sit on the ball. Carson Beck looked as nervous as Josh Heupel in a press conference. It was bad. I mean, it really was. Now, Carson Beck ended the day or whatever you want to call it on 27 for 35, which is pretty solid numbers. But it is not what it should be. His QBR rating is 79, which is slightly better than what Spencer Rattler was. And Spencer Rattler threw 2 interceptions. We were only averaging about 7 yards a pass. Pitiful performance by Carson Beck. He should be ready by now. He's not ready. He's clearly not ready. Now, I don't know why he has been at Georgia for 4 years now and can't figure out how to settle down and play football. It's not like he didn't know what to do. It's not like he's having to reinvent the wheel here. He basically can look at the game plan that we ran and say this is, he played essentially under Stetson Bennett and Todd Monken. He should know how to throw a football by now. And by throw a football, I'm talking about throw a football to somebody. I think our longest pass of the night was a 36-yard pass to Ra Thomas, which, by the way, we only threw the ball to twice. We split them evenly pretty much between Brock Bowers, Dominic Lovett, and Rosemy Jack Saint. 13-yard long, 14-yard long, and 1 deep pass to Rosemy Jack Saint at 32 yards. That was it. That was almost 100 yards of his offense came from 4 passes. Pretty sad. Pretty sad. Hats off to Dejon Edwards for coming out and absolutely showing up. My goodness, man. Dejon Edwards, 20 carries for 118 yards in one game. It's been a little while since we've seen one guy get 100 yards rushing in a game, and he got almost 120, averaged 6 yards a carry. He got himself, by the way, every touchdown we had was a rushing touchdown, which I can't name the last game that's happened in. Carson Beck didn't throw a single touchdown. Now, while Georgia's second half performance was pretty intense, pretty stellar, not going to be able to play this way and pull off any kind of win against any really competent opponent. Fortunately, the entire whole of college football seems to be struggling with an exception here and there. Otherwise, Georgia would not look as good as it does. Georgia's had ample opportunity to get this problem fixed. I don't know what the problem is, but I can tell you it's in my, well, I don't know for a fact this is what the problem is, but this would be my suggestion. Carson Beck is not the guy. He's not the guy. He's scared. He's playing scared. He's running around scared. If the check down guy is available, that's where we're going. A bunch of dink and dunk and yawn fest. 27 receptions and less than 270 yards passing. Now, the Georgia's total offense was not bad. Georgia's total offense, when you look at the team stats, was 458 yards. South Carolina was at 256, so Georgia had almost double. Excuse me, that's their passing yards. My mistake. South Carolina had 300 yards. Their rushing was, 53 yards in rushing the whole game. They weren't running the ball, and they didn't need to for the first half. I saw some sloppy secondary work from Georgia, leaving defenders wide open time after time after time. And by the way, South Carolina was doing the same thing. South Carolina was leaving some of our guys wide open several times. And Carson Beck just didn't see them. And I don't know why. I don't understand it. There was multiple times where there were players downfield in their own zip code full of green grass all around them, and we didn't throw the ball. Now, some Dogs fans may come out and say, hey, the weather was bad, and that's fine. But the weather was bad for both teams. It wasn't just Georgia. Georgia wasn't the only team getting rained on. So, not a great game. Georgia had 29 first downs. 29 first downs. And only managed 24 points. Oh, and while we're on the subject of poor performance, the kicker, I don't know what he thought his job was at Georgia, but sir, your job is to kick field goals. You literally have one job. One. You have one job. So our kicker is Woodring, and he has kicked 3 field goals. Excuse me. He attempted 3. He made 1. You cannot miss field goals when they are like what we saw last night. Hey, if you're trying to kick a 61-yarder like the guy in Missouri who made his kick, yeah, people can expect that to go and miss. But in the 20s and even some in the 30s, you shouldn't be missing those kicks, especially as bad as he was missing them. I do not want to see him on the field ever again. I'm not saying that he should never play football. He just needs to go to a football school that will help him get better. We're at Georgia. We don't necessarily have time for you to figure out how to kick a football at this point. Yeah. If that's harsh, I'm sorry. But I would not go to Lockheed Martin Air Force base or whatever it is. I would not go to the Air Force and say, I'm a fighter pilot. Put me on the front lines and I can't fly a plane. That doesn't make sense. So that's got to be changed immediately. Also, hats off to Dylan Bell, one of the best running backs we have, who's a wide receiver, by the way. I don't know what's going on with that. Cash Jones, I think, gets his first touchdown. Hats off to him. Oscar Delp saw the ball one time. Arian Smith saw one pass for 5 yards. I don't know what's going on with the choices here, but Carson Beck's got to do better. Carson Beck has got to do better. South Carolina rushing. They had 53 yards total rushing. 35 of that came from Spencer Rattler. South Carolina has absolutely no rushing game whatsoever. Shane Beamer doesn't seem to believe that rushing is necessary. Georgia had almost 4 times as many rushing yards as they did. Almost 4 times as many. And then the interesting thing was in the press conference, he comes out and says that, well, we see what kind of football team we can be. Really? Really? Because you led by 11 points at halftime? Georgia got it together in the second half and held South Carolina to 0 points and then put up 21 unanswered points of their own. So, I mean, it was nice to see Georgia turn it on, but Georgia had an opportunity. They could have got 30 points out of this game, and they peed down their leg and threw that away. So, a 10-point win's nice. Georgia should have dominated South Carolina, especially with their inability to run the ball. South Carolina's defense was able to get 2 sacks against Georgia, which is pathetic and sad. Georgia's defensive line, Georgia's defense was able to get 3 sacks, which is decent. But the things that matter here was the 2 interceptions. Georgia got 2 interceptions, one by Dan Jackson and one by Tyke Smith. Great job by those guys. But overall performance, a C at best. A C. Now, if you're grading us on a quarter by quarter base or a half by half, I'd say an F in the first half and a B plus in the second half. So that's where you get your C minus from. But poor performance here. This isn't going to cut it. To have as much talent as we have on the field, we got to do way better than this. So that's my output today for the Georgia game. Yeah, Georgia fans are upset and should be. Georgia got a lot of work to do. Should have had a lot of this stuff figured out by now. But I don't know who they thought they were. Maybe they thought they were the back-to-back defending national champions and we're going to have 0 drop-off, but that's not who we are. We're the back-to-back defending champions who need a lot of work. We have a lot of talent, but we need a lot of work. So we'll see how Kirby and crew does with them this week. You know, coming up this next week, I won't say a down game. UAB has actually played pretty well in years past. Georgia has absolutely dominated them, and Georgia should dominate them this. They've lost their last 2 games. If Georgia doesn't hang 40-plus points on UAB, alarm bells should be ringing. Alarm bells should be ringing. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Really appreciate you guys tuning in. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you guys so much for being here. Have a great day. God bless. Go Dogs.